So you've decided to start powerlifting.
Well, that's pretty exciting, but there's a couple more things that you need to know before you really get into the sport. As a powerlifter, you are primarily concerned with the squat, the bench, and the deadlift. So today we're going to go over the cues that really resonated with me for those three lifts, and in addition, I'll go over the commands that you'll get when you inevitably fall in love with the sport and go on to competition. No time to waste, lots of content to cover today. Let's jump right in. As always, if you want any more information on any of the content that we go over today, be sure to check the links in the description. Today we'll have 3 articles linked. There's a separate article for each of the lifts that we'll be going over, and they're pretty informative, so if you need any visual examples beyond what's in this video today, be sure to check those out. If you want to join our mailing list, you can actually get access to a Powerlifting Beginner Kit that I put together. So there's a couple programs that I wrote. As a disclaimer, I'm not a certified personal trainer. These were written for myself, by myself, and based on nothing but my own experience and a couple classes in college. So take them with a grain of salt. Definitely make some adjustments if you need to, but they're a great way to get started with a powerlifting style of training. So if you're not sure where to start, join the mailing list, get that free starter kit, and start hitting some PRs. My final disclaimer before we really get rolling here, it's cloudy and rainy. Welcome to upstate New York. Also, it's like 7 p.m. So we have this crazy shadow in the background because I'm using my desk lamp. When you get to competition, the first lift that you perform is the squat. If you've heard of SBD, it's squat, bench, deadlift in that order. This is why. Here's your reason. Today I have five squat cues for you. These are what helped me get my squat from a sloppy looking, not even close to depth 185 to what I would consider is a pretty acceptable 350-pound squat. Now, this was not overnight. This actually took about 2 years. There was COVID in the middle of those 2 years, and I wasn't really competing until about a year ago, but I was training. It's been 2 years. Either way, it took me a while to find these cues, so I guess I'm speeding this process up for you. I'm going to give you these cues ahead of time, and if they resonate with you, definitely adopt them. See how these can improve your training. And if they don't resonate with you, or if your squat is already great and you're comfortable with it, don't fix it. If it ain't broken, don't fix it, you know? Just because I'm telling you this is what I do doesn't mean that this is what you have to do. So if it doesn't make sense, don't do it. The first cue is to press your knees out. So during the squat, some people will experience some knee valgus, knee cave, knee knock, whatever you want to call it. Basically, your knees kind of fall inwards towards each other, and this is your body trying to kind of compensate and create like a unified force coming up from the middle. It's not necessarily a bad thing. A little bit of knee valgus is normal. If you've seen lifters like Amanda Lawrence, she has what some people would consider to be extreme knee valgus, but she's been cleared by a certified professional who has examined her and her body and her proportions and her movement patterns and has been like, okay, well, if you're not experiencing pain, this is okay for you. So take it with a grain of salt, but as a beginner, if you're definitely just learning your form, you should try and keep your knees as straight as possible. So what I mean by that is don't let them cave in towards the center when you're coming up out of your squat. The second cue that I have for you will actually help to avoid that a little bit, and that is to keep your knees and your toes in the same plane. Now that's a weird cue. I haven't actually heard anybody else say that cue, but that's how I thought about it. That's what made sense to me. So when I'm squatting, my knees go over my toes. I will repeat, my knees go over my toes. This is a normal movement pattern. This is okay. This is not going to hurt you. What can hurt you is if your knees and your toes are not moving along the same plane. So think back all those years ago when you were learning about parallel lines. So if you have 2 lines that are moving completely parallel to each other, that's basically the movement pattern of your knees and the direction that your toes are pointing. So whichever direction your toes are pointing, your knees can extend over them as long as they're along a parallel line to your toes. Now again, if that doesn't make sense to you, just ignore it. In addition to keeping your knees and toes on a straight path, you also want your bar path to be relatively straight. As you start moving loads that are close to your max, it might not be the straightest of bar paths, but again, when you're learning form, you should definitely try and focus on maintaining a straight bar path. So what that means is if you set up a camera and you record your squat, the point where your bar starts should be directly above the point where your bar stops at the bottom of your movement when you're in the hole, and it should go straight back up to the point where it starts. There shouldn't be any kind of U-shapes or like leaning forward. You shouldn't be doing what we call a stripper squat or a good morning. Your back should stay relatively straight. And the next cue that I have is actually going to help you keep that straight bar path as well. So the next cue that I have is to sink your hips. A lot of people, when they're first learning how to squat, are told to sit back. I don't think there's anything wrong with sitting back, but I think that it can be interpreted and implemented the wrong way. So when you're told to sit back, you think about pushing your hips back. And to compensate for that, a lot of people will lean their chest forward. The goal of a squat is to go down. You will naturally go back in order to maintain your own balance. So if you think about driving your hips down, sinking them between your knees almost, you'll inevitably sink your hips backwards too, because that's the only way that you're not going to fall over. But thinking of going down instead of back might help you keep your chest up. Another cue that I'm not really going to go too far into, but a lot of people will say, is to shine your chest forward. So if that makes sense with you, go ahead and go with that. But either way, you want your hips to go down. They will go back of their own accord. Make sure your chest is up so that your bar path is straight. Now, the final cue that I have for you isn't really a cue as much as a reminder that you, in fact, are human, my friend, and humans need oxygen. So what does that mean? You need to exhale. A lot of powerlifters will do what's called the Valsalva maneuver. You might have heard it as bracing. The Valsalva maneuver or bracing is a huge breath in, and you kind of hold that air in, and it's supposed to create a lot of pressure in your torso. A lot of people will start with that and then not let it go until after they rack the bar. That's not necessarily the go-to. So when you're at or past your sticking point, when you have the movement, it's in the bag, I like to exhale out. This is on my way up. So I'm in the hole, I'm holding my breath, I start to drive up. If I start to get stuck, or if I know I got this and we're done and it's cool, I forcefully exhale out. Exhale on your way up, don't hold your breath the whole time, you're gonna be seeing stars. Not cool. Okay, so you have the cues for the squat. Let's say you train your squat over the course of 6 months a year, and you're like, Gia, I'm ready, I want to compete. You're gonna go up to this platform, and you're gonna unrack this crazy heavy bar because you are a strong one, my friend. And the judge is going to yell 2 things at you. Start, or squat, and rack. So when the judge says start, that is the only point in time where you are allowed to start your squat. If you start your descent prior to the judge saying start or squat, it doesn't count. It's a bad lift. When you get down to the bottom of your squat, you hit depth, you can come right out of the hole. You don't have to wait for any commands, but you need to stop at the top. So you need to lock your knees, and you need to hold the bar steady and still until the judge says rack. At which point, the spotters will inevitably grab your bar. One side will inevitably be heavier than the other because one spotter will grab a little bit more weight than the other. This is just how it goes, and they will usher you back into the rack. So what's going to happen is you're going to get under your bar, you're going to walk it out, you're going to lock your knees, and you're going to stand there. And the judge is going to say start or squat. You're going to inhale, you're going to brace, you're going to squat. You're going to come out of your squat, you're going to lock your knees, and you're going to stand there. And the judge is going to say rack. And then the bar is going to be ushered back into the rack. And your squat is done, and 3 weight lights because you're strong and talented and successful. After you nail all 3 of your squats, you are going to start benching. But Gia, we haven't gone over cues for bench. How do I bench? Well, I'm still figuring that one out myself. I am part of that poverty bench gang, but I do have some cues on how to set up a strong foundation for your bench. So that is arguably the most important part of your bench, is the foundation and the setup. So I have 4 cues to help you set up properly for the bench press. As a disclaimer, I have a gnarly arch. A lot of people don't like it, and if you're one of them, that's really tough, buddy. If you're coming after powerlifters and women and basically anybody who is strength training with an arch in their back during their bench, you are objectively wrong, and you should probably just step back and assess your own life and your own workout, because who cares what they do? Just worry about you, you know? So now that my arch disclaimer is over, the first real cue is to spread your lats, and I think this is something that everybody can really agree on. Now, we talk about spreading our lats because it creates a bigger surface area to press into the bench. It allows you to grab onto the bench a little bit more, so you're not sliding as much because of your leg drive. We'll get to that. And it also just creates a strong and steady foundation in order for you to be able to generate power to push that heavy, heavy barbell up over you. Now, the second cue is to drive your shoulders down. This has really 2 meanings. You want to definitely drive them into the bench to make sure you're making fierce contact with the bench, but it's also bringing them down as in not up. Like, you don't want them to be shrugged up. You're not a turtle. Don't shrug them up to your ears. Instead, think about the position that your shoulders are in when you're standing and you have heavy weights in each hand. Just standing upright, holding like a 50, 60, 70 pound dumbbell in your hand. Your shoulder is going to naturally kind of rotate down like this. You're not going to be holding it up. You're not activating your traps. You're just letting it hang down, and naturally it's going to roll back a little bit too to just kind of settle into your lat. So that is kind of the movement that you want to think about. Another cue that might help is tucking your shoulders into your back pocket. We'll unpack that more when we get to our deadlift cues, but think about rotating your shoulders down and then spreading your lats and pressing into the bench. The third cue is where things are about to get spicy. When I unrack, I set up my back, so I spread my lats, I press my shoulders into the bench, and I lift my butt up off the bench. This helps me to keep my leg drive really solid the whole time. It helps me to press through my full foot, and it helps me to make sure that I'm creating tension from the floor all the way up to my shoulders with no pit stops in between. If you lift for USAPL, you can't lift with your butt off the bench. So my butt's up, I unrack the bar, and then I lower my butt to the bench. If I lower my butt too fast, or if I completely drop my butt onto the bench, I'm gonna lose all of that pressure that I just created from my feet up through my shoulders. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to let my butt just barely kiss the bench. The final cue that I have is really the same thing as letting your butt kiss the bench, but talking about your feet. So you want to make sure that you're driving through your feet the entire time. Even if you don't pick your butt up off the bench to unrack the bar, you want to make sure that you're pressing through your full foot, through your heel, through your toes, making sure that you're getting full, even pressure from the floor. Driving in through the floor and through your shoulders is going to create a lot of rigidity and tension in your body, and it's going to help you direct your power output to that barbell instead of directing it to keeping yourself in place and not sliding back and forth across the bench. We're back to our competition day, and we've just completed our 3 squats, and now we're getting ready for the bench press. We have all of our cues. We've been training for months. We're ready. You're going to get 3 cues for the bench press. The first cue, once again, is start. You'll get this cue when the bar is unracked over you, your butt is on the bench, your feet are on the floor, and your shoulders are driving into the bench. You have to have those 3 points of contact, and your elbows have to be locked. Once the bar is motionless in that position, the head judge will give you the start command, and you're going to lower it down to your chest. You're going to touch your chest, and you're going to bring it to a standstill on your chest. When you get the press command, that is when you press. Wow, rocket science over here. So you start to press the barbell up, and once you get it up to its starting position, because once again, you are a very strong person, you're going to lock your elbows out again. Once you lock your elbows out, you're going to wait again for the rack command, at which point the spotters will basically take the bar from you, but you still need to hold it as they guide you in to the rack. Then you're done with your lift, 3 white lights, hoorah, hoorah. So once again, that is start, press, rack. And finally, we've made it to the deadlift. I have 4 cues for the deadlift. These aren't necessarily in the order that you would execute them, but I think it's the easiest order to explain them. So the first cue that we're going to talk about is going back to almost what we said with driving our shoulders down on the bench. We're going to tuck our shoulders into our back pocket. When a lot of people are learning how to start deadlifting, they get told to retract their shoulders. Now to me, that is pulling my shoulder blades back and pinching them. You cannot keep your shoulders pinched when you are lifting a heavy weight off the ground. So instead, I like to give the cue, tuck your shoulders into your back pocket. If that doesn't make sense, but the holding heavy weights by your side and letting your shoulders go where they naturally go does, use that cue. Either way, your shoulders need to be pressed down, they're depressed, they're tucked into your lats, they're going into your back pocket, they're retracted if that makes sense to you, but they're not pinched. Whatever makes sense to you, you want your shoulders to be back. The next cue that I like to give is to focus on bringing your hips through. You want to bring your hips closer to the bar. A lot of people will give the cue break the floor. I like break the floor. I think it makes sense, but I think that really only gets you up off the floor. What you want to focus on is bringing your hips to the front. You want to stand up and like shoot your hips forward, almost like a thrust, right? So you're squeezing your glutes at the top. You're focusing on getting your hips up as close to the bar as you can, and that's going to help to change your kind of perception so that you're not pulling through your back, but you're pulling through your glutes and your hamstrings and your posterior chain. The third cue that I have is to squeeze everything. So I had a coach who told me that if I was not uncomfortable in the bottom of my deadlift, I was not set up correctly. That kind of resonated with me. So what he meant by that was when I'm setting up before I rip that bar off the floor, I need to tense every muscle that I have. You tense your glutes, you tense your lats, you tense your hamstrings, you tense your calves, you tense everything that you have to create so much tension that you can't help but rip the bar off the floor. Now the final cue is less of a cue and more of an order of operations. So when I set up, I set my feet first, then my grip, then my shins, we'll get to it, and then my back. For a conventional deadlift, I set up my feet so that the bar is directly over the center of my feet and my feet are just about hip width apart. The next thing that I worry about is my grip. I bend my knees, I sink my hips, and I lean forward so that my shoulders are just in front of the bar and I grab the bar. I prefer a mixed grip. If you do hook, you are in league with the devil, and if you do double over, you are actually just faking it. Set your grip. Grip the bar wherever's comfortable, however you want, grip the bar. After you grip the bar, what you're going to do is you are going to finish adjusting yourself so you're not so much rolling the bar. If you set the bar up over the center of your feet, you're not moving the bar, you're moving yourself towards the bar. So this is pulling the slack out of the bar simultaneously, and you're kind of sitting back so that your shins are in contact with the bar. Finally, you're going to set your back. I do this in conjunction with the third step, so I bring my shins to the bar as I set my back. That's tucking my shoulders in my back pocket, and that pulls the slack out of the bar at the same time, so it's kind of a 3-for-1. We're all about efficiency here. You want to make sure that the bar is touching your shins and your shoulders are tucked into your back pocket and your back is set and neutral and straight before you begin your movement. Then you squeeze everything, and then you bring your hips through, and that is a deadlift. Now, you get one cue for the deadlift if you go to competition, and that is down. So you go through whatever ritual that you want to go through before you lift, and you get out on the platform, you go through your setup, you rip the bar off the floor, and you lock it out at the top. Your shoulders are back, your knees are locked, and you're waiting for the head judge to say down, at which point you bring the bar to the floor. It does not need to be slow like a negative. It does need to be controlled, though. You can't just let go of the bar. That will not count as a good lift. You basically fold in half and collapse with the bar, and it goes back to the floor. Once it stops bouncing, you let go of it, and you turn around to see 3 beautiful white lights waiting for you because you are so strong. So those are the cues that I've kind of picked up throughout the years. They make sense to me, clearly. If they don't make sense to you, don't implement them. If you have any questions about what they mean, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to clear them up for you. You can definitely check out the articles that I've posted in the description. There's some video examples as well as some just more kind of words to describe what I tried to describe here. And if you have any other cues that you like to use, definitely drop them in the comments below because you never know who they might help. Thanks for watching. Be sure you hit the subscription button and turn on notifications so you don't miss a beat. This is powerlifting by women for women, and we are here to help you find the strongest version of yourself, absolutely annihilate diet culture, and show them what it really means to do anything like a girl. See you in the next one.